Hi, I'm Courtney with Missouri Star Quilt Company, and I'm here to show you how to make these great wine gift bags. So let's get started. This is what the package looks like when you get it. In this lovely bag, there are 3 different styles of wine bag. I've made 2 out of the 3, and you'll see this is pre-printed batting, which makes this great because as we're piecing this, you're also quilting it. So when you're done, all you have to do is sew the binding on and you're done. You don't have to go back and quilt it, which is great. So this is what it looks like. So the first thing I did is we go around and we cut all of our shapes out. These round circles are the bottom of our bag. And I left, about 1.5 inches around each shape and cut out each of my bags. Then we're going to place them on our fabric, on our backing fabric, and we're going to spray baste it. So this is what my piece looks like before I basted it. And now I use spray baste. Yes, you can use straight pins, but I really like the spray baste. It gets it nice and flat. It doesn't move. That backing fabric doesn't move. And just make sure you spray baste outside. Let's talk about yardages that you need. The yardage that you need for all 3 bags, you need 6 to 8 1/4 yard cuts for the front of your bag. You need a 1/2 yard of fabric for your binding, and you're going to cut that binding on the bias. This is a little bit of a curve in there, so you want to make sure that your binding is on the bias. And you need a yard for your lining or your backing of your bag. You can use a jelly roll strip. There is one little trick with one of the bags. On this bag, you'll see this piece is wider than a jelly roll strip, right? This is 4 by 6 instead of 2.5 inches. If you were to have a jelly roll strip at home, just piece 2 jelly roll strips together and then trim it down to 4 inches and you've got your piece that'll work. So jelly rolls are great. This is the only time where you'll have to fake it with that. But you still will need your yardage as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we are going to sew on this outside line of our bag. What that is doing is that becomes our cutting line after our bag is done. Now, when I did my first bag, I thought I was being all smarty pants, and I used a thread that matched the back, so I used black. I went to trim this bag up, and I could not see my thread. So because this line is going to be covered by your binding, go ahead and use a contrasting thread here. I put white in so it's nice and obvious. So let's go to the machine. You'll notice on the machine I do not have a walking foot. I have just my regular foot. I did not have a problem with the whole bag using a regular foot. Now, if you find that your fabrics are bunching up on you, go ahead and change to a walking foot. But like I said, I didn't have any trouble. I have an 80 by 80 12 Microtex needle in the top. I didn't have any trouble with that either. Okay, now that that's all done, by the way, you did get wonderful printed instructions in here, so you don't have to come find me every time you need to make a bag. You have lovely printed instructions. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut all of this backing away from my batting. This is a little bit sticky, and I don't want to deal with that, so I'm just going to trim this up a little bit more. Okay, now we're ready to piece this. So in your directions, it tells you how big of pieces to cut for each number. I went ahead and pre-cut all my pieces, and I labeled them with this lovely numbering system with my little notebook paper and a pencil. I'm not fancy, let me tell you, but I do what works, okay? So I have them labeled 1 through, this goes through number 16. So the first thing we're going to do, you're going to lay your number 1 fabric right on that number 1, right side up, okay? Then I'm going to lay the number 2, let's flip this. I'm going to lay my number 2 fabric right side down on that line. And then I'm going to kind of flip this over to make sure that that fits. When you're on an angle, sometimes your fabric can get off a little bit, and I did piece one where I went up too tall, and then I was left with this little mark here. So I kind of just do a fake little 1/4 of an inch and make sure that that piece is going to fit, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and sew this seam, and where I'm sewing is I'm going to start past the edge of my wine bottle piece, and I'm going to go past it when I get down here using a 1/4 of an inch seam, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and put in my black bobbin. Okay, first seam is sewed. Okay, I'm going to flip that over, and I am going to finger press that. Don't use an iron at this point. Sometimes in the directions, June Tailor says that the iron may shrink your batting up a little bit, and you don't want to do that. So for now, I'm just using my fingernail and pressing that open. So now we're ready to do number 3. So I find my lovely numbered 3 and 4 pieces. And here's a tricky one. Look how far down we have to come on that. So I want to make sure that my piece is going to cover that, and that should be good. Might come down a little bit more. Now we're going to sew number 3. Gonna flip that. That looks great. I got past that line because that's going to be my sewing line for my number 13. And that's all we're going to do the whole rest of the project. We're going to flip and sew onto each other until we have this whole thing covered in fabric. Okay, so now we have our runner. Looks like a table runner, doesn't it? We have our wine bottle all done, our wine bottle carrier. So the next thing we're going to do is, I really don't have any pieces hanging out here, but I could pin this a little bit, because what we're going to do is, now we're going to follow this line, and we're going to sew just on the inside of that little white line to hold down all the fabrics when I cut it out. Okay, so I just want to hold, this is kind of floppy there, and this is kind of floppy here. Just be careful when you pin it that you don't hit it with the pin when you're going around it with the sewing machine. Okay, just be careful. And now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to top stitch that down from the wrong side. Okay, so we went all the way around with our little stitching, and now we're going to cut right up next to our stitching line, okay? Hence why that white thread's so important. Okay, so that part's all done. Now we're going to need our bias binding, okay? I have it here, it's folded in half, just like a regular double fold binding. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off so I can see where to start. I'm going to hang this off the edge a little bit up there. I'm going to come around this corner, go all the way down, and come around that corner. Be very careful when you're using this bias binding that you're not pulling on it too much. If you pull on it too much, once you try to pull this around to the back side, it's going to pull on your wine bottle bag, and you don't want to do that. So just be very careful when you're putting that binding on. Let's get the binding on, and we're going to do both sides. Alrighty, so you'll notice that mostly out of habit, I stitched my binding to the front, and then I am going to pull it around to the back, and then I'm going to stitch in the ditch next to where that binding meets my wine bottle bag. You can do it any way you like. If you want to stitch it on the back, pull it around to the front. You could use a real pretty decorative stitch to attach your binding. You could also pull this around and hand stitch it to the back. I am all about the speed on these, so I'm going to do everything by machine. If you have, if your wine-loving friends are complaining about the way the binding is on, you need to buy them more wine. Okay, so I'm going to trim these. And now I'm going to take these to the machine, and I'm going to top stitch right in that ditch. Alrighty. So I have those bindings on. See how fast that went? Did we get all by machine? I'm going to trim these ends even with the side of my bag. Now, I'm going to fold this in half, right sides together, and I'm going to stitch down either side. Now I'm going to give you a little tip that I use. The most important thing to me is that these top edges line up, okay? The bottom looks great too, but I would rather, if I had an option, I want that top edge to line up more so than my bottom. The other thing that I like to do when I have something that I'm starting on an edge with, I will start stitching about 1/4 of an inch down from the top. I'll start stitching and then I will go back, go over the edge and come back on itself. That way I don't have any little thread tails hanging out the top of my bag. The thread tails that I trim will be 1/4 of an inch in and you won't see them. So keep that in mind if you're doing any other projects where you have to start on kind of a fold that you may see. Start down a little ways, back up, and then proceed. So let's go ahead and stitch those sides. Alrighty, now we're ready to put the bottom of the bag in. So the bottom of the bag is just a little circle with the diagram on it. You'll take this to the machine. You'll sew around the edge of that circle in a contrasting thread again. And then I switched over to a matching thread and stitch the lines. What those lines are is they're registration marks to see how we line up the bottom of the bag with the seams in the bag. So those I can kind of feel. The most important thing that I want to be able to see is that circle. So once I get that stitched, I'll go ahead and lay this back down, and then I'll stitch on top of my circle and on top of my the X that's in there, and then it'll be in all 3 layers, and then it'll look like this. You'll have it all stitched out and ready to put in the bottom of your bag. Now, you can use either side for the bottom, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to take the one where our thread is there, I'm going to line that up with the one side seam. I'm going to line the other one up with the other side. And then this is just going to, you kind of work it in there. And it doesn't look real pretty, but it'll work out, I promise. Okay? And I would get another 4 or 5 pins, and I'd probably put, and I'm going to put about 3 pins per side. And then we're going to take it to the machine and stitch it, and we'll be ready to turn it right side out. Alrighty, we are ready for the unveil. And you are all set to go. Alrighty, so now you have this great gift bag. Have a drink to celebrate. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial by Missouri Star Quilt Company.